My name is Jamie Miller, and I'm a Vice President for Public Programs at the Aspen Institute. And it's my great pleasure to welcome to our stage Facebook founder, chairman, and CEO Mark Zuckerberg, who will be interviewed by Cass Sunstein, professor from Harvard University. Thanks. It's great to have Professor Sunstein back at the Ideas Festival, and we are so pleased and excited to welcome Mr. Zuckerberg to the Ideas Festival for the very first time. Thank you both.
So it's challenging to follow an Emmy Award-winning artist. I do have a song that I'd like to sing that I wrote. Okay, we'll wait on the song. My interest in these topics, as Mark knows, came from a book that I wrote called #Republic, which is actually very concerned about democracy and social media. And I found myself on a train getting a call from one of Mark's employees saying, you know, we're also concerned about social media and democracy. Might you be willing to talk to us? And I found that a great honor. And I've had 2 occasions to work on specific projects as a consultant with Facebook, and the opportunity to explore, I think our topic is the future of the world. Is that what we agreed to?
As much as we can fit in 40 minutes.
In 40 minutes. Lightning round. The first issue, which is, I think, very salient in many nations, is that the governments have been thinking about regulating social media. The United States has a firm tradition of freedom of speech, and it's not exactly usual. I did empirical research, courtesy of online research strategies, and it's not usual, I can confirm, to find the heads of companies calling for regulation of their own companies. But you have done exactly that, called for government regulation. Can you say a little bit about what inspired that and what areas you'd like to see regulation in?
Sure. So, I've spent most of the last few years focused on trying to address some of the biggest social issues facing the internet, and that our company in particular is at the center of. And the 4 big ones that we've focused on are election security and preventing election interference, free expression and while removing harmful content, privacy and making sure that we get those issues right. And one that's gotten a little bit less attention, but I think is as important, is portability and interoperability and being able to move between services to increase innovation and competition and enable research. So through working through these issues, we've made a lot of progress on each of them. We've built up our systems internally in elections, which I'm sure we'll get into in a bit. There have been many elections around the world over the last couple of years. The results have been a lot cleaner online due to a lot of the work that we and others have done in partnership. But one of the things that I've kind of come to after a few years of really spending most of my time working on these issues is that in order to solve these issues, you get down to some fundamental trade-offs and values that I don't think people would want private companies to be making by themselves. Right? So questions like, how do you balance what the line is between free expression on the one hand and safety from content on the other hand, and privacy about what people are allowed to say, human dignity and decency. Those are really hard questions to answer, and as a company, we try to do the best that we can, but I think that if as a society, if we were rewriting the rules of the internet from scratch today, it is not at all clear to me that what we would want to do is have private companies make so many of these decisions by themselves. And in a lot of these areas around, for example, what constitutes political speech and what should be acceptable advertising around an election, I really don't think that as a society we want private companies to be the final word on making these decisions. So where I've come out is, look, in the absence of regulation on some of these things, we're going to do the best that we can and build up very sophisticated systems to be able to handle these issues. But at the end of the day, I don't think that that is necessarily the ideal state that we all want to be in. I think we would be better off if we had a more robust democratic process setting the rules on how we wanted to arbitrate and draw some of the trade-offs between a lot of these values that we hold dear. WhatsApp has helped to drive a lot of that trend. WhatsApp isn't as big in the US yet, but around the world, it definitely has been on the leading edge of changing that. So it's driven innovation, it's driven lower prices, more competition in the whole broader ecosystem. And again, I think, bringing all the resources that we've had to bear on that, I do think that if the founders of WhatsApp would probably agree with this, that if WhatsApp had remained an independent company, it would have focused on texting, and it would have been good for that. But now, as part of our company, it's developing into a much broader private platform for all of the different ways that you might want to interact privately. It's we launched WhatsApp Status. It's the biggest ephemeral stories product in the world. I don't think that necessarily the WhatsApp team would have built that on their own. And we're working on launching payments. I don't know that the team would have wanted to or would have built that on their own, given the direction that they were on and the resources they had. So I just think you want to be careful with being overly broad in these analyses. Yes, some mergers can be bad for innovation. These weren't, and I think it would be very hard to make the case that any kind of innovation or kind of competition in the broader ecosystem was decreased because of the work and the innovation that we've brought to bear on this.
Okay, so one thought I have as you talk is that there's regulation related to our issues of democracy, privacy, and portability. There's your own standards currently, and there's also the future of self-regulation. And a lot of the action is really in the future of self-regulation. And there are three areas there that are currently really salient. One is Libra, the currency. One is the independent oversight entity, where the issue of trust and bindingness is obviously relevant. If this isn't clear, the oversight board may have binding authority over Facebook, which would be the first time. And so that's what you're anticipating. And then there's the issue, I guess you call it a privacy pivot, which would be a conception of privacy which is kind of privacy on steroids compared to what we've discussed so far. So can you say a bit about the relationship between trust, self-regulation, and these three very ambitious future paths?
Yeah, so on all these things that are socially important, I think whether the regulation comes in the form of a democratic process and legislation or regulatory agency or industry self-regulation, I just think on each of these questions, we're past the point where it makes sense for Facebook to unilaterally make decisions on so many of these things that are socially important. So you mentioned the independent oversight board for content. We're putting in place an appeals system where basically if we make a decision on your content to take something down that you think we took down and it shouldn't have been, you'll be able to appeal that, and we'll handle the first appeal internally for now. But then if you still don't like the answer after the appeal, you'll be able to appeal it to this external board. It's like an overall appeals process, and it'll be independent of Facebook. Those aren't going to be Facebook employees. And if they say, hey, no, that content is fine, it needs to stay up, or no, that content that Facebook said should be up actually needs to come down, and you need to work on different policies, their decision is going to be binding. So you can kind of think about it as almost like a judicial analog in creating some separation of powers and some industry self-regulation. We're starting this as a project just for Facebook, but over time, I could see this expanding to be something that more of the industry joins or sends something up together as well. Similarly with Libra, we just announced with 27 other companies, because this wasn't just us doing this, the foundation of the Libra Association to help build a cryptocurrency and a financial infrastructure to help give financial inclusion and more access to the financial system to the billions of people who don't currently have access to a bank account or the ability to do payments easily from their phone, and who really would benefit from having the ability to do that. Building a financial system is not the kind of thing that a company can do by itself. right? So that, again, we helped and played a role in helping to stand this up, but the Libra Association is an independent organization, and we will have one vote in it. Out of by the time it launches, hopefully we will have 100 co-founding companies, and we'll be one of the voices. So I do think that we need to, in addressing more of these issues, help stand up more independent processes. I still think that over time, regulation and kind of a robust democratic process is the right way to handle a lot of these issues, but we also aren't going to wait for that to happen, because sometimes that takes a while. So doing more independent structures ourselves on this is something that I think is going to be increasingly important.
Great. The last words go to Benjamin Franklin, who in 1787 asked what in Philadelphia had been given to the American people by the delegates to the Constitution, said, and these words should never be forgotten, "A republic if you can keep it." And our discussion has been centrally about if we can keep it. Heartfelt thanks to Mark Zuckerberg and Aspen Ideas.
Thank you.